Australian Aviation Podcast, the official podcast of Australian Aviation, unpacking the latest insights, developments and issues impacting Australia's aviation sector.
Hello everybody, my name is Adam Thorne and welcome to the Australian Aviation Podcast. Those of you watching this on the YouTube will notice that we have yet again changed studios. We are basically back in, like, they've not even named them properly, like Studio 1. We went from Studio 1 to Studio 2. They've upgraded it. We are now in like stunning 4K. Well, you're probably not actually watching it in 4K because that would drain your internet, but we're recording this in 4K, which is extraordinary. Got new lighting. There's like lightsabers, red lightsabers on the ground, giving it like mood lighting and stuff. I mean, this is pretty much on a par with an actual TV studio. I am joined, as ever, by my incredibly talented co-host, Soot, the Air Services dog. Say hello, Soot. Hello.
Hello, Soot.
This is nonsense, isn't it? I'm also joined by my other co-host, Boo Hiss, Jake Nelson. Jake, how are you?
Hello, Adam. I will say that being shot in 4K probably not doing us any favours.
No, that is true, actually. That is true. Do you reckon we're going to get like a hair and makeup budget next week? Because that's what we need.
Possibly. Yeah, I do have stage makeup for when I do shows.
Do you really?
Yeah.
Like actual makeup at home?
Yeah, it's like I just use foundation. I've got some eyeliner and stuff.
Yeah.
You can't have your face shiny when you're on stage and your eyes need to pop.
Okay. So. Would you say maybe next week if we do it in this room, you can do a bit of makeup? Maybe you can do mine as well?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
I'm not made of makeup, Adam.
Okay. Anyway, we'll start as if we'll
not made up of it.
No. We will start off as we usually do with shout-outs and announcements and stuff. And of course, as will be the case for the next kind of 6 weeks, our big shout-out is the Australian Aviation Awards and the Australian Aviation Summit. Now, our Australian Aviation Summit, which is taking place at a date which kind of escapes me, but is mid-August. Jake, what is it?
August the 14th.
August the 14th. That's why you've got your fancy new iPad. Anyway, it will be...
Excuse you, it's a Samsung Galaxy Tab S9 FE.
Right. Anyway, our summit will be headlined by the maestro, Alan Joyce. He'll be making one of his first public appearances since he stood down as the CEO of Qantas. He will be talking through his kind of experiences during COVID and all the things he's learned and, giving some kind of feedback on that. It will be absolutely incredible. You can come down and see the great man himself. We've got tons of other speakers that we have. Well, some we've announced. We're going to announce a lot more over the next couple of weeks, so keep your eyes peeled. It's sponsored by our principal partner, Leidos, who've been very nice in supporting us and putting this on. They'll be sending down a couple of big wigs as well. So that's happening during the day. In the evening, we have the Australian Aviation Awards, which is a very fancy black tie dinner shenanigans in Sydney. If you want to find out who's been nominated or who's been shortlisted, we actually announced that earlier today. So if you go on australianaviation.com.au, you will see our list of finalists. This was the biggest ever year we had for entries, so thank you everybody that entered. Even if you didn't get nominated, you can still come down. It's a really good excuse to come down, meet Jake, and obviously network with everybody in the industry. It's a very, very fun night. So come on down. It's at the Illumina venue. It's like at Sydney at the Martin Place metro station. It's dead easy to get to. So go on the website, have a look, and we'd love to see you there.
We've had some big nominees, haven't we?
We have lots of big nominees, which I'm hoping you're going to be able to rattle off on your new Samsung Galaxy 720, whatever that is.
S9 FE, Adam.
S9 FE.
S9 FE.
You only got that the other day, didn't you?
I only did get it the other day. They had an excellent price at JB Hi-Fi, who are not sponsoring this podcast.
No, and you've actually got the pen as well. For people
I do. It comes with the pen, which is very nice. So some of our some of our big finalists we've got for Airline of the Year International. We've got people like AirAsia. We've got Fiji Airways. We've got LATAM and Vietjet. On the domestic side of things, we've got ASL, Airlines, Marumba, Nexus, Team Global Express. We've got some fantastic nominees for Airport of the Year: Bankstown, Cairns, Canberra, Newcastle. We've got, the Regional Aviation Association of Australia. They're nominated for Association of the Year. We've got sustainability initiatives from people like Air Services, Canberra, Jet Zero, Little Wings, Newcastle Airport. We've got rotary wing businesses like Babcock and Life Flight. We've got them all, Adam. We've got them all.
Yeah, we got them all. It has been a brilliant year for entries, actually. Pretty much everyone that could have entered did actually go for it. So thank you very much.
And we are eagerly looking forward to seeing who wins in each category because we don't know. So don't ask us.
We don't know. Actually, they've not even worked it out yet because it's got to go to the judges.
Yeah.
It's got they rattle through it. We got any other shout outs at all? Any other things anyone we say thank you to? Any nice moments we want to rattle off? Sounds like a no.
That seems about it. We should probably get to the news or something.
Okay, all right. And
it's our listeners demand to know what's happening in the sphere of aviation, and who are we to deny them?
Who are we to deny them? Well, I tell you what, this is sort of hot off the press. Mere hours ago, Jake was at the ASX play, the trading floor, not to trade stocks and shares. Have you traded stocks and shares before, by the way?
No, I have there's a thing that I use called Raise, which rounds up purchases and stashes them away and invests them in stuff, and so it's really, really minor investments. But I don't really trade shares.
No.
Wouldn't know how.
No, me neither. Anyway, you were on the trading floor of the ASX in Sydney, and you watched as the bell was rung for Virgin Australia's relisting on the ASX. Jake, you were there. Tell us a bit more.
Yeah, they have finally returned to the ASX after 5 years off the boards. And this was at midday on Tuesday, which was today as of the time of recording. They listed at initially $2.90 per share, but that jumped up to $3.13 within the first 30 minutes. So a successful IPO for Virgin. Dave Emerson rang the bell at exactly midday to kick off the return. They have listed under a new ticker symbol. It's a VGN as opposed to VAH, which is what they used to have. There was a lot of interest from investors. Apparently the IPO was oversubscribed, and what that means is basically there were more people looking to buy shares than there were shares available.
Presumably that means the price goes up.
Yes, it does. And this was not a float that was needed to raise money for Virgin. No. Virgin had plenty of money already. This was to get a return for its existing backers. Bain Capital has put a lot of money into Virgin over the years, and so they wanted some of that back. And Qatar Airways has that stake, and of course Virgin Group and Queensland Investment and a few other people still have holdings in Virgin. So there was 30.2% of the shares were put up for sale. Bain is no longer the majority shareholder, and it's back. Virgin's back on the ASX.
Which is actually, it's an extraordinary story, because I remember, I've been at Australian Aviation 5.5 years, so I remember when Virgin went into administration. I remember when it got taken over by Bain, when it came off the ASX, when its fleet got almost decapitated or massively reduced, then kind of seeing it slightly come back to life, its fleet increasing, et cetera, et cetera. So it's now back on the ASX. What's amazing about this is that the talk for the last kind of year, 18 months, is that they would struggle to relist, or they'd struggle to have the interest. So there's all kind of negative news on that. They've also probably have one of the worst weeks they could possibly relist, and we'll get to this a bit later, because we've had all the conflict and trouble in the Middle East, which has closed airspace. And I know that maybe doesn't necessarily directly affect most Virgin Australia flights, but it kind of gets that message out there that aviation's maybe not a secure thing to invest in. So they've had all of this kind of bad news, and yet they've managed to relist. The price has basically gone up, probably more successful than most had hoped. So it feels like almost job done for Bain now. They've certainly given away, or not given away, but they've sold off effectively most of the business. So they've got 30, 40% less, something like that?
Something like that.
Yeah.
I off the top of my head, let me just. This was we reported on this a few weeks ago. So Bain now holds 40% of Virgin Australia. Qatar has kept around 23%. And existing management, others have kept 7.8%. But 30.2% of the stock has gone to new investors, from which there was plenty of interest.
And so they had this whole ringing of the bell thing. And I think I said to you earlier, is that I don't really know much about stocks and shares. Is that the traditional thing to do when somebody...
I believe so. Yeah. When a company lists, I believe they do ring the bell. I think they do that. Do they do that in New York as well? Yeah,
I was thinking maybe it's like the start of a day or the end of a day. Yeah. They ring the bell and everything. But I didn't even. I know it's in Sydney.
There's bell ringings in other professions as well.
Go on. This will be a pre-prepared gag. Go on.
Well, it's like my partner works in a hospital. She works in a pathology.
Well, there's a bell ringing in a hospital.
Well, it's
when someone dies, they ring the bell.
No, well, I mean,
no one's gone.
When a cancer patient is declared cancer free.
Oh, now I look bad, don't I?
Yeah, when a patient is declared cancer-free, apparently in at least in the hospital that my partner works in, they get to ring a bell.
That's pretty good. To be fair, that is all right. That's quite nice.
Yeah, so bell ringings are a cause for celebration in hospitals. They're a cause for celebration in Taco Bell. Because when you enjoy your tacos, you're supposed to ring the bell about it. And they are rung at IPOs. So there you go. The bell rings. Ask not for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for Virgin, but in a good way.
Right, excellent. Well, on that perfectly wrapped up note, we're going to go for our first break. And when we come back, we're going to talk a lot more nonsense. We'll be back in a minute. Okay, welcome back. So we spoke there a little bit about Virgin's big relisting on the ASX, which so far as we record this seems to have gone pretty well. What are we talking about next?
Well, we should probably address the whole Middle East issue.
The whole Middle East issue, right?
Yeah, the whole Middle East issue. There's been a bit of chaos, at least today, at time of recording again. The conflict between Israel and Iran, which may or may not be in a ceasefire as at time of recording. We don't know. But there has been some impact on flights. We've got, I believe the RAF is planning to repatriate some people. There's a couple of Globemasters that have landed at Dubai, I think, over the weekend. So there might be some repatriation flights from Iran and Israel happening soon. There's like 4,200 people across both countries who are looking to come home. But flights to the Middle East have been sort of scrambled. We had two of these brand spanking new Virgin flights to Doha that had to be diverted because Qatar closed its airspace as Iran shot missiles at an American military base in Qatar. So VA1, which is Sydney to Doha, diverted to Bengaluru in India, and VA15, Brisbane to Doha, diverted to Muscat in Oman. Both of those aircraft landed safely, and they continued on to Doha later in the day after Qatari airspace reopened. Meanwhile, we've had some Qantas diversions. So QF9 from Perth to London Heathrow diverted to Singapore, whereas QF33 from Perth to Paris Charles de Gaulle returned to Perth. So it kind of highlights, I guess, the dicey nature of flying through the Middle East as a major hub. Because, if you look at a map of the Middle East, I mean, Qatar is sort of right across the Gulf from Iran, for example.
It's kind of tucked a bit south, but sort of before the danger zone, essentially.
Yeah, so I'm pulling up Google Maps now.
This is live journalism.
And I'm looking at Qatar on my fancy screen here. So right across from Qatar is Iran, and right across from Dubai and the UAE and Abu Dhabi and everywhere in the UAE is Iran. It's right across. It's called the Persian Gulf for a reason. And so, Israel is sort of on the other side of Saudi Arabia there, and any missiles that are going from Iran to Israel or vice versa have to pass over, Iraq, probably Jordan as well, and or Syria. So it's a dicey kind of airspace, and if there's missiles flying over Iraq and Jordan and Syria, then Iraq and Jordan and Syria probably have to close down their airspace as well. Which forces flights to reroute because you don't want to be hit by missiles when you're in midair.
Exactly. I mean, it's weird because, Australia, like myself, it's kind of a nation of immigrants, and it's a nation of a significant amount of people will once or twice a year or every other year will want to go home, often to Europe, to America, whatever. So there needs to be a stop-off most of the time. Yeah. And the way that the industry has evolved over the last 20 or 30 years, particularly with, say, like the rise of Emirates, etc., and Qatar maybe in the last 10 years, is that a lot of those hub points are in the Middle East. Again, it's Etihad, Emirates, Qatar, and now like a major part of Australian travel. You kind of almost can't avoid those stops. And the problem we're going to have is that it's been kind of stop-start for the last week or so. Is that if all of those hubs were to close, then suddenly it becomes very hard for a lot of those people to get back home. It becomes very hard for international travel in Australia. Maya, our colleague at one of the other brands in Momentum Media, she's looking to travel in about a month or so to go home. And she was telling me...
I think Emily as well, your nemesis.
Emily, not nemesis. She's Emily, if you are watching, she is my friend. We don't talk about what I say off camera.
Someone could be a friend and a frenemy. But she's looking to go home to France, I think.
So the issue of these people like Maya's like texting me in a panic this morning. She's like, well, if they close, she's flying with Qatar, and she's like, well, if they close Doha, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
And she was basically told that they would give her like, I don't know, like 90 hours notice if they do it. But she's like, that's not enough time to organise, alternative travel routes. So that is a danger that you could have an off and on kind of thing. Obviously, like probably things are going to be okay, but it's also slightly terrifying if you're flying near routes where there are missiles, flying through, particularly like ballistic missiles, which would basically kind of fly up almost to space and then come back down again. So, this does put Australia in a very, very tricky position. Now, I know that there were a couple of Qatar flights that I think you mentioned there that were diverted. The bulk of the time, I think as we record this, kind of like Qatari airspace is sort of reopened.
It's reopened, yeah.
It's reopened. Now, obviously, this puts Qatar in a tricky situation because if they were to somehow shut Doha for a week or two, the amount of the industry that Qatar has now, or the amount of the Australian international travel that it has, is quite huge. So that causes all sorts of trouble. Obviously, difficult for Virgin Australia as well. And now basically wet leasing Qatar flights. So the hope is this situation does get better. We will avoid the pure geopolitics.
Brian, we're not going to discuss it. No. You're okay, Brian. You can keep watching.
Right. So as we record this, there may or may not be a ceasefire. As we record this, it's very, very hazy.
Yeah.
God willing, there is. And obviously, if there isn't, our main concern is people that could die. To be very clear, but it could also cause absolute chaos of the Australian aviation industry. Yeah. So we just have to kind of hope that things kind of work out all right on that.
Now, there are alternatives, of course. There are alternative hubs that are used to fly between Australia and Europe. The traditional ones are like places like Singapore and Hong Kong. Of course, it is also tricky what with the problems with Russian airspace and Ukrainian airspace. Now, the Qantas flights via Singapore were, I think, unaffected. That's the QF1, QF2 service that goes via Singapore to London. And I think those are going to be unaffected. One question is, I guess, does this demonstrate the need for Project Sunrise?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very interesting that the Perth to London flights were also affected because
they go over that airspace.
Yeah, and also because we've done this previously for the Dreamliner. It is capable of doing those ultra long haul flights, but it's kind of at the very edge of what it's capable of. Whereas the A350 1000s, the kind of special adapted ones that Qantas are getting, that is going to be very much more in their ballpark. And there is an argument which I think Alan Joyce sort of almost made when he was CEO. It's almost like for national sovereignty, you need this. You need to have these aircraft that can do these long routes in one trip. The other point that Alan Joyce made at the time was that he would argue that they're the only airline in the world that could really afford to buy a fleet of 12 of these, because obviously with Australia being so far away, it's the only airline that would have a need to necessarily have that many flights with ultra-long-haul planes. But yes, I think it does, like you say, very much prove that these things are a necessity. You made an interesting point there. It's like if we've lost Russian airspace, we've lost the Middle East, that's a large chunk of the world. And
I mean, you might want to consider, do we want to put on more flights through Joburg, for example? Because Joburg, if I'm going to look at the map here, but Joburg, I think you can just basically fly straight uphill, as it were. So if you fly through Joburg, then you can probably draw a straight line from Joburg up to London without having to cross over Middle Eastern airspace. So Joburg could be another possibility. But I mean, you've got Turkey, but Turkey's also in the Middle East. It's again right next to Iran, so that would probably Turkish Airlines would probably have a bit of trouble there. But it's clear that I suppose if we want to keep if things don't cool down, airlines might want to have a look at opening up some other hubs.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually a very good point because we've become incredibly reliant on that. And
maybe India.
Yeah. Okay, what's next? We're going to chat about next.
Well, let's turn from international to domestic, Adam.
Oh God, yeah, go on. Sounds like when you're teeing me up to talk about something.
No, because I'm not teeing you up to talk about anything, Adam, because the Huey is my baby.
Right. Okay. Of course.
It's time to hand out once again the Huey Award.
Give a brief description of what that is.
The Huey Award is the award for the most reliable airline for a given month. It is called the Huey Award because, like Huey Lewis, it's for the airline that can promise you it will be back in time. And this is based only semi-scientifically on the BITRA data, which is made publicly available by the government and measures the on-time performance. So we shall start off by saying that once again, Virgin has beaten Qantas. Virgin has achieved a reliability trifecta. They have beaten Virgin Australia and Vara together, the Virgin Group. Good week for Virgin because they've bested Qantas and QantasLink together for reliability again. VA flights saw 86.6% on-time departures, 84.8% on-time arrivals. Whereas QF flights...
86% just for on-time...
Departures.
That is very, very good.
That is very,
very good.
And 0.8% cancellation, so more than 99% of Virgin flights for the month of May were completed, which is very good as well. Qantas flights, 83.2% on-time departures, 82.5% on-time arrivals, 2.9% cancellations. This is for Qantas and QantasLink. We also saw an end to Vara's run of zero cancellation months. Yes, that's a shame. 1.3% of flights cancelled. So it was good while it lasted for Vara.
Still pretty good, 1.3%. Let's not be too down on them.
1.3%, yeah. And it's still better than, Qantas Link and Qantas together. It's that sort of equal with Jetstar. Towards like the low end of number of cancellations. So Hinterland cancelled 0.4% of flights. Virgin Australia itself, 0.8%. 1.3 for Virgin and for Vara and for Jetstar. Well done, Jetstar. 1.9 for Qantas, 3% for Rex, 3.5 for QantasLink, Skytrans 6.6. So cancellations, Vara still did very well. It just was not 0%. But one thing that we noticed, and that we did not pick up on last month, was that across all participating airlines, on-time performance and completion rates are above the long-term averages.
Now, the reason that is significant, I think I should almost look into the camera for this bit. No, I'm not. The reason this is significant is that basically you obviously had COVID and then...
I never had COVID.
No, you never had COVID. I've never had COVID either. Basically, obviously, kind of COVID disruption kind of ended technically early 2022. That's when international flights kind of started up again, etc. And what we had was, in particular, a year of absolute chaos. We had some of the worst delays and cancellations on record. And the reason for this was that airlines kind of did too much too soon. They kind of sprang back to try and put on their previous service. Things started going very, very wrong because many reasons, but effectively didn't have enough staff because too many people were let go. Whether that was right or wrong is another debate. And so airlines kind of compensated by this in the end by having kind of more flights in reserve or have more aircraft in reserve. But the whole thing was a total mess. Things have got substantially better since then, as every year has gone past. But nonetheless, it's kind of COVID hangover has been there for a long, long time. And again, one of the issues is, we still maybe don't have enough staff, or we're struggling to get hold of aircraft, or just supply chain issues in terms of maintenance and stuff. All these issues, they've all added up. And so actually, even till a few months ago, basically it was still a lot worse than COVID. We've now had 2 months where we're above the long-term average. So what this basically means is that in terms of delays, cancellations, etc., we're basically at 2019 levels. It's like the pandemic never happened, which is obviously very good news. It's also absolutely extraordinary, but it took 5.5 years to get to this point. That is how big a deal COVID was to the aviation industry. It was, a once in a lifetime, God willing, event which completely crushed the industry. I've always, in the last kind of year or two, been coming up with these moments for when are we kind of past post-COVID. So looking at the points where maybe we have, the same amount of routes or the same amount of aircraft or the same amount of passengers, etc. But this is one of the biggest kind of keystone, milestone moments. We're now getting to a point where reliability is getting back to normal.
And we're having as well, incoming passenger capacity from overseas is jumping above 2019 levels. Domestic capacity, I think, not quite there yet. But it's looking, as the pandemic recedes further and further into the background, it looks like we're finally back to something approaching normal.
Yeah, we are. And so what are going to be the kind of long-term takeaways? Well, I remember during COVID, people were like, almost, would anyone fly again? Or would flying just be a rare thing you do to go on holiday? And there was definitely a period where people thought that would be the case. I think we can say that definitely isn't the case. The fact that we're effectively back to normal now has proved a lot of people wrong. I think one of the only hangovers, or maybe the biggest hangover, is, and it's hard to get exact numbers for this because they're not necessarily released, but it feels like we have slightly less business travel than we did before, which is, I think, was kind of due to this rise of Zoom and video calls. And it's interesting because we had video calls before 2020, but they weren't necessarily used as much. It was almost like not the done thing if you had a meeting to do it via a video call, whereas now that's how the majority of meetings take place. So I think business people...
Skype, by the way, completely dropped the ball.
Yeah, what happened with Skype? That is, forget BlackBerry, they messed up, but Skype, how had anyone even heard of Zoom before COVID?
Yeah, they were the generic term. I'll Skype you.
Yeah.
And then just...
Yeah.
There's a very funny video by Brennan Lee Mulligan of Dropout and College Humor. He's like the CEO of Skype, and he's talking about like, here at Skype, we're here for you, and then he just like full blows turns on ranting at his customers. We had it made, damn it. We were the firm. What the hell is Zoom? But yeah, it's a great sign for the industry in general that we are back above the long-term averages. Let's see if we can keep them there.
Yeah.
But it's been so long that of below average performance month after month after month, and finally, the airlines in terms of reliability look to have got their act together.
In particular, whoever it is at Virgin that is responsible for their performance, give that person a pay rise because they've done an exceptional job. The idea that you're beating Qantas, a much larger and richer competitor on these things, month after month after month, is actually really, really good. It also kind of vindicates Virgin's sort of new approach, which is not to try to be bigger than Qantas, not to try to take it on as a full service, and in fact, not even to care about market share, just to say that we're going to do what we do very, very well.
And Dave Emerson, by the way, remarked upon this at a media conference after the bell ringing. He said that the airline is different in every way from what it was like when it went into VA in 2020. Got high customer demand, but he said that, quote, we're very now focused on serving the domestic Australia market and serving the customers we can win, serving the small business, serving the value corporate, serving the premium leisure segment, those people who really value the product that we put out there. He said, we think that's going to be very successful going forward. You can already see it in our numbers. We've changed the whole business model, but what hasn't changed is the focus on delivering good customer service.
It's interesting because obviously, like whether Brain or private equity, I'm sure they'd say they're private investment, whatever. But the argument against private equity generally is a general thing, is that all they care about is profit and they don't really care about anything else.
Yeah.
But in a sense, that's kind of what Virgin needed. It needed somebody to come here and be quite brutal and be like, we need to focus on making money, not on trying to almost, beat Qantas at their own game. They needed to almost lose the ego and focus on what they were good at. And it's like the kind of eye of a needle. No,
yeah.
Eye through a needle.
Oh, yeah.
Needle through the eye.
Threading the needle.
Threading the needle. That was a very difficult balancing act they've had to pull off. They've done very well. A lot of that credit goes to Jane Halitka, the old CEO who's actually managed to make it work. But they've turned around an airline that was losing basically $1 billion a year to one that we think is now making quite a healthy profit with tons of prospects for the future.
And as I was saying last week, it's one of those rare examples where private equity has actually done what it says on what it advertises itself to do, and rescued a business that was badly in need of rescuing. Yeah. So I hate to hand it to a private equity firm, but good job, Bain Capital.
Capitalist Jake Nelson. Yeah, he thought we'd see the day, eh?
Yeah. But there is one question that remains unanswered, Adam.
Oh yes,
which is the matter of the Huey.
Yeah.
Now, apologies, by the way, to Hinterland Aviation, who won last month's Huey. I know your reign on the trophy has been very, very short because we were slightly delayed by various matters last month. But I think this might be one of my most controversial Hueys yet. Because, Adam, the award, the Huey Award for the most reliable airline goes to everyone. What? The whole sector.
What?
The whole sector for finally, for 2 months straight, finally making it above the long-term averages.
You can't do that.
It's my award, Adam. I can do what I like.
When you started in this role, you were like, I'm more left-wing than Marxist, and you were some sort of socialist dream. And here we've got to this kind of socialist utopia where everyone's a winner. Oh, isn't Miss Lovely? Like,
it's
no.
what we've all been working towards. No, I'm sorry, Adam. I'm sorry. No, the Huey Award goes to the most reliable airline, and all of the airlines have lifted their reliability to the point where for this month and this month alone, all of the airlines get the Huey. So Hinterland, I guess you keep it, as does Virgin and Qantas and Jetstar and all of the others. Everyone gets the Huey Award this month, Adam. That is my final ruling on the matter.
Okay, right. Well, on that note, we're going to go for one more break.
I know my generation is supposed to be the participation trophy generation, but in this case, I think it's warranted.
Okay, welcome back. So after the very controversial decision to award the Huey to everybody, presumably Jake's now going to be talking about a kind of universal basic income or some other such lefty nonsense.
No, Brian wouldn't be pleased about it.
What are we talking about next?
Well, there was a bit of a shocker of an ATSB report that came out the other week.
Yes, you do need to talk about this.
So this was a crash that happened in November 2023. It was a fire surveillance aircraft, a Rockwell 695A Jet Prop Commander, VHHPY, that crashed near Cloncurry in Queensland. And it was operated by Ag Air. And the ATSB has spent, a year and a half, basically, looking into this. And what they've discovered was pretty appalling. Apparently, so the crash itself was due to pilot hypoxia.
So that's basically when you kind of can't breathe. You almost like you fall asleep because of the fumes.
You don't have enough oxygen.
Yeah. So you kind of
And so your decision making is impaired. Your reaction speed is impaired. All of these things. You might as well be flying drunk, right, or flying half asleep. And what had happened? The pressurization system in this aircraft had been faulty for a while, and Ag Air had known about it and not fixed it.
Yeah.
So what had happened was, and this is a quote from the ATSB report, and this is a quote from Angus Mitchell, who is the chief commissioner of the ATSB. He said, over a period of many months, the accident aircraft's pressurization system was not reliably maintaining the required cabin altitude. This led some company pilots to employ a variety of actions in the aircraft to manage the potential and deadly effects of hypoxia, including at times briefly descending to lower altitudes and improperly using emergency oxygen systems. And we saw the pilot, by the way, during this flight went from 28,000 feet down to 15,000 for about 6 minutes, then went back up to the previous altitude. They reduced power shortly before the accident, and the ATSB says this might have been to try and replicate, to try and do that descent again, to get the oxygen levels back up. This led to a loss of speed and this unrecoverable aerodynamic spin that led to it hitting the ground, killing all 3 people on board. The ATSB found that this onset of hypoxia significantly degraded the pilot's ability to safely operate the aircraft. Possible that the pilot even lost consciousness at some stages. According to air traffic control recordings, the pilot was demonstrating significant and progressive impairment, including slowed, stuttering, and flat speech, operational mistakes, and signs of confusion. Now, what was going on, according to, again, the ATSB, and this is a direct quote, management attempted to have it rectified, but they did not formally record the defect, communicate it to the safety manager, and undertake a formal risk assessment or provide explicit procedures to pilots for managing it. Angus Mitchell says, instead, Ag Air management personnel participated in and encouraged the practice of continuing operations in the aircraft at a cabin altitude of 19,000 feet, and as such, required the use of oxygen without access to a suitable oxygen supply. The ATSB said the pilot had normalized the practice of managing the intermittent pressurization issue by undertaking short descents to lower altitudes and by using the emergency oxygen system, which, says Angus Mitchell, quote, represented a practice of using a critical safety system designed for emergency use only in order to continue a commercial activity.
What's really important to say, and we do say this quite a lot when we talk about these reports, is that the kind of the whole sort of philosophy of the ATSB is on this kind of no blame report. So they exist not to prosecute people, but so that we can learn the mistakes that are made to stop them happening in the future. And this kind of no blame philosophy runs all the way through the organisation. You see it in all of their reports, particularly in that they never actually name any of the individuals. They only say their kind of job title.
Yeah, the pilot or the co-pilot or the
and they're very careful about how they write the reports, which are very, very thorough and very detailed. They're also very, very careful about how they write their media releases and things as well. Again, the no blame thing is really integral to how it works. That is, without a shadow of a doubt, in the 5.5 years I've been doing this job, the most kind of damning thing I've ever seen or heard in a report. They've made it very clear this airline was, or this airline, the organisation was to blame for this. And effectively what they've said is they've turned a blind eye to this. Effectively, that aircraft really should have been grounded, but not just kind of carry on working around it. And they've been very, very clear that, people here have made very, very serious mistakes, and those very, very serious mistakes have led to a few people losing their lives.
And can you believe, Adam, that it gets worse?
Go on.
Because the ATSB has reported that in its final report, it said that air traffic control, the controller had detected potential signs of hypoxia. They'd lost radio contact briefly, alerted Ag Air management, and so that the flight had been placed in an alert phase. So the air traffic control alerted management and Ag Air, who did not tell the air traffic controllers about the pressurization defect.
That's extraordinary, isn't it?
Yeah. Angus Mitchell says, quote, "In this conversation, critical safety information about the known intermittent pressurization defect in the aircraft was not relayed to ATC. Had it been done so at the time, the aircraft could have been directed to a lower, safer altitude when contact was re-established with the pilot shortly afterwards." And when the pilot was contacted again, the air traffic control was told that the oxygen system was working fine. And so there was no re-establishing of the possibility of hypoxia, despite the fact that, and again, this is a direct quote from the ATSB report, the pilot, quote, mispronounced words and repeated a clearance 4 times.
It's extraordinary. So actually, the air traffic control was incredibly kind of on the ball to see this and to do everything right. But effectively, and we don't necessarily know whether the person at Ag Air who would have been aware of this, but as a company of itself, the idea that they almost had a second chance, and whether it was one person to blame or whether it was a kind of culture, but that is an extraordinary turn of events. For an industry that prides itself on safety in this idea that you have backup after backup after backup after backup, the idea that so many things
Swiss cheese model.
Yeah, the Swiss cheese model. The idea that so many things could go wrong is extraordinary. And effectively, 3 people have lost their lives through for a culture or for an organisation that weren't operating as expected.
Now, Air Services was not let entirely off the hook here. According to the ATSB's investigation, there was no guidance in Air Services' hypoxic pilot emergency checklist on ceasing an emergency response. So, according to the ATSB, this increased the risk during a potential hypoxia scenario of inappropriately downgrading the response. Now, Air Services is conducting a review of this emergency response checklist. Meanwhile, the ATSB, again, direct quote, has issued a formal safety recommendation to Ag Air to initiate an independent review of its organizational structure and oversight of operational activities to implement ongoing effective operational control by management. Essentially, sort this out.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that is, quite a lot to take there. We've probably got time, aren't we, on now? We've probably got time for one more story.
Yeah, a bit of an update on this new TAA situation.
Oh, so these are the people
and Rex in general.
Yeah, these are the people, the organisation that's sort of trying to buy Rex. They've been kind of rebuffed a little bit.
Yes.
And their idea is effectively to restart, or they've kind of bought the rights to the name TAA of a legendary old domestic airline, and that they would effectively have Rex as a sort of subsidiary of TAA, kind of based as a sort of a new hub in the north of the country.
Yeah,
that's got it about right. Yeah.
So a couple of things have happened, as we sort of mentioned last week. This second bid had been knocked back by EY and its advisors, Houlihan Lokey. But what has happened, and I spoke about this, by the way, last night as at times of recording on ABC News Radio Evenings, and for New South Wales and ACT. So check out that recording if you want to hear more from me for some reason. So the administrators have applied to the federal court for an extension to their period, another one, to basically winnow down the potential bidders and to finalize a sale process. Now, we know that Anchorage Capital Partners, which, by the way, is distinct from Anchorage Capital Group. Anchorage Capital Group is the US-based firm. Anchorage Capital Partners is an Australian firm that currently owns David Jones. Yes, confusing. But the group that wants to bring back TAA is Renaissance Partners. And so Renaissance Partners has been vocal for a while about its plan to build this restored TAA to be Australia's third airline. And there's been commentary that, the administrators have supposedly thought that the proposal is complex, it's not credible, it's not serious. And Andrew Cochrane, who's the chief executive of Renaissance Partners, has basically come to us and said, and they've put this out in a media release as well, but they came to us first because we are amazing. But they came to us first, and they said, he said, quote, "For clarity, it is none of these things. It is simple, credible, and serious. Moreover, it is responsible." He says, "I find such comments misguided and a little offensive, not just to us, but to our backers and all Australian and regional communities, depending on a committed, long-term, and sustainable solution." He said, "It's also curious, given the administrator's capability assessment, confirmed Renaissance to have the capacity to own and operate an airline." Renaissance says they want creditors, secured and unsecured creditors, to get their money back, as much of it as possible.
They're not going down without a fight, basically.
Yeah, they're not going down without a fight.
Yeah, so effectively the administrator has sort of rebuffed them. Actually, a couple of times they tried the first time round, and they seem very, very determined to make it happen. The fact they're so determined to make it happen, the fact they've gone to such lengths suggests that they are very, very, very serious. Obviously, we may never hear the administrator's side of the story, but nonetheless, it's like one of those rom-coms where the guy keeps asking out the girl and she keeps rebuffing him, but he keeps going, and in the end they fall in love and they're happily ever after, maybe.
And what Renaissance Partners has basically said is, we don't need RACs in order to build this new TAA, but gosh, it would help.
Yeah, and we saw that with Bonza, where it ended up taking them like 18 months or something to get their air operator certificate, which is effectively their driving license. I've massively dumbed that down, but it's the main piece of paper you need to run an airline. So if they buy Rex, they kind of immediately get that. They immediately have a fleet of admittedly old, but they still got, some active aircraft. They also have all the kind of infrastructure in place. Obviously, they have crew and they have staff and they have everything there. So it kind of fast forwards the process probably like a couple of years. So I can see why they would see that makes sense for them to get going. And similarly, you can look at the comparison with Rex, where they were able to start flying 737s relatively quickly because they had that the thing there. So it would make sense if you wanted to start a larger airline to start with something that's already there.
Yeah. So it would be. They're saying it would really help us. To get our hands on Rex. It's not essential we want to start the new TAA anyway, but this would give us a leg up. Yeah. Which I think is sort of fair enough. So we'll keep following this because it is very, very interesting, and we'll be interested to see who the administrators and who the creditors decide to sell Rex to. Looks like the prospects of nationalisation may be getting slimmer. We don't know.
That's good. But balance out the socialist utopia that you introduced earlier, the whole sector. Well done to everyone.
I think it's well deserved, Adam. I think it's well deserved. They've got all of the airlines have gotten their act together, and they have rallied and pulled their performance above the long-term averages.
The problem is you're just running out of jokes now. Like we've given it to basically everyone we can give it to over the course of the introduction of the Huey Awards. So it's like you were on like season 5 of a TV show and we're having to do some mad stuff just to keep ratings up. Yeah, that's how
we'll see if it works.
Yeah, we will. Right. It's probably gone.
But good for it. We'll put this on our social media. Is this the most controversial Huey Award ever? Get it on YouTube and Facebook and Instagram. Get a real Channel 9 voice on it. Is this the most controversial Huey Award in history?
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah. That's the one where they do like the trailers to those terrible TV shows and they like exaggerate everything to stream.
Oh, it's the classic movie trailers. In a world where everyone can be the most reliable airline, one airline wants to be more reliable
than anyone else.
Keep going. We can cut this up for social media. Pressure's on. Go on.
It's hurting my throat, Adam.
All right. Well, that's rubbish, isn't it? Yeah, you messed that up, didn't you? Right, we should probably wrap up the show now. You're not going to...
Yes, probably.
Yeah, right. Thank you very much for watching. I would say thank you to my co-host, Jake Nelson.
Goodbye, Adam.
And also to my co-host, Sit. Can you do like a dog's voice now?
Goodbye, Adam.
That's just nonsense, isn't it? We're going to be back on this show the same time next week, but for now, from us, goodbye.
Goodbye.